If you're a young founder today earning good money, you're not ahead, you're exposed. A lot of them were never taught the difference between high income and real wealth. 5 years later, they have nothing to show from it. Status does not protect you. Assets protect you. Income is temporary, but wealth is built deliberately. Well, guys, I'm back in the UK, checking in with my team here, and I thought I'd put another video out explaining why most young founders I meet lose everything. And let me be very clear from the start here, right? Most young founders don't fail because they are lazy. You know, they're super hardworking, they're ambitious, super talented in a lot of cases. And typically, the founders are in the 1% of what they do. But the reason they fail and potentially lose everything is because they are reckless with their success. And I see this every single week in Dubai, young entrepreneurs earning serious money, 10, 20K, 50K months, even six-figure months. And there's a few occasions where I've bumped into some young founders in their 20s, believe it or not, doing 7 figures a month, which is just astonishing, right? And yet 5 years later, sometimes less than that, sometimes it's 2-3 years later, they have nothing to show from it. No assets, no security, no optionality or flexibility. And it is just a memory of a good run, which is so sad to see. Especially from someone who works in wealth management, right? So today I've put a video out there to try and explain why most young founders do lose everything. And even though their income looks incredibly good initially on paper, what prevents them from almost solidifying that success longer term and having something to show for it at the end of the run. So just to add a bit of context to this video, this isn't criticism of young founders. If anything, it's exactly the opposite. Because many of these young founders I work alongside or are good friends of mine, and they are super smart, hardworking, highly ambitious, and have taken risks which most people would never do. But the sad thing is, what I realize is a lot of them were never taught the difference between high income and real wealth, and confusing the two is one of the most expensive mistakes these young founders make. So the first brutal truth that I want to talk about is that high income creates a false sense of security for these young founders. They almost feel invincible because the money's coming in so fast. They just naturally assume it's always going to be there. They have no experience of anything other than what they're experiencing in that moment, and they stop thinking defensively. They stop thinking long term. They stop thinking about the downside risk. And, to give you some examples, I work alongside some really great founders that run e-commerce businesses that have a 12 to 24 month run. And then, they disappear. They're nowhere to be found. Their runs come to an end. The same with info product creators. They're riding the next hot offer, 12, 24 months, 3 years, their offer comes to an end. What have they got to show for it at the end of the day? And a lot of the time, sadly, they drop off the face of the earth and they haven't got anything. And the same with agency owners. They land 1 or 2 big contracts, clients even, and they rely on that so heavily. And instead of asking the right questions, so things like, how do I protect this? How do I protect this level of wealth, this level of income? They're asking themselves questions like, how do I enjoy it in the short term? Because they want to impress other people, and that's a sad consequence, I suppose, of social media to a degree. So that mindset alone is what wipes young founders out. And here's the uncomfortable part, because I work with a lot of young founders, and some of them are going to watch this video and it is going to resonate with them. They can sadly spend to impress instead of protecting what they have. And young founders don't lose money typically by investing badly. They lose money performing for success. The cars, the watches, the trips, the lifestyle inflation. And it's not because they're stupid. These are incredibly smart, switched on individuals. It's because that's what they think success is supposed to look like, especially when it comes to things like social media. But here's the reality, right? Status does not protect you. Assets protect you. And when times get hard, your watch won't save you when your revenue drops. Your rent is not going to be paying you out. It's a cost. Your car doesn't compound in value, or very few actually compound in value. And the thing is, a lot of young founders confuse looking rich with being secure. And the sad fact of the matter is, the bill will always arrive later, the cost of doing that. And the next point I want to make is absolutely critical, right? Young founders don't often understand how fast industries can change because they've not experienced it. They're not experienced as a founder. They're not in their 40s and 50s. And this point, like I said, is so critical because young founders dramatically underestimate how fragile their industry is. Everyone has that almost like confirmation bias that the gravy train, like I said, is never going to end. And I've seen it repeatedly, right? So when it comes to like e-com, I've seen stores crushed by ad spend, changes in algorithms, new competition coming in. I've seen info products dry up when audiences move on, the offer no longer is applicable. Agencies wiped out when they lose one or two big contracts, and entire businesses regulated out of existence, so to speak, because massive changes have come in. So your industry does not owe you longevity. And I think that's quite hard for a younger founder to sometimes acknowledge, because you don't want to, I suppose, reflect and or think about the possibility that there's going to be that much change in a short period. And just because something works today doesn't mean it's going to work in the next 3 years, 5 years. And yet most founders behave like the income is permanent. And sadly, from my experience, of doing this for nearly 15 years, it almost never is. So another huge mistake I often see young founders make is they have all their eggs in one basket. And, they treat their business as if it's their retirement plan. That's going to go on forever. And they reinvest everything and extract nothing along the way. They build no balance sheet. They build no external assets outside of the business. And yes, I appreciate reinvesting into your business often generates the highest return on investment, the highest ROI. And as you can appreciate, I do that myself as a founder in the businesses I'm involved in. But that only works if the business survives for a long enough period for you to enjoy it. And for a lot of young founders, the runway for their business is often a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So what they need to understand is that profit extraction is so important along the way. Capital allocation, risk diversification, they bet their entire future on one outcome working perfectly, the present situation working perfectly for the long term. And that's not ambition, that is gambling. And you know what? This is the tragedy of it all, right? No compounding equals no time advantage. And young founders, they have the greatest advantage of all. They have time, and they sometimes waste it, because they delay investing, they delay building assets, they delay thinking long term, and they don't realize something as simple as this. Money invested doesn't just grow, it compounds identity. It compounds discipline. It compounds the security they're going to have in the future. And every year you delay compounding is a year you'll never get back. And I see founders, in their late 30s, 40s, 50s even, and they're desperately trying to catch up because they didn't do this stuff at an earlier stage. And what they did is they sacrificed, or wasted even their highest earning years on lifestyle instead of leverage. So another uncomfortable truth is that a lot of young founders have no second skill. They have no backup plan. They know one thing typically really well, whether it's an offer, a platform, a business model. And when that ends, and it often does, they can't transition forward. They fall backwards, and they have no transferable skills. They have no assets that they built up along their journey, while they were producing a good level of income in the good years. They have no runway left with their current business model. And instead of going from founder to investor, if they'd have put the right things in place, they go from founder to an employee. And psychologically, that is devastating. So why does this keep happening? Real reason this happens is actually quite simple. Young founders were never taught how to play the long game, especially when it comes to wealth. They were taught how to make money, how to market, sell, scale, but they weren't taught how to protect, how to allocate, how compounding works, how to de-risk, and more importantly, how to think in terms of decades, not days. And experience, I suppose, teaches you this lesson, but experience is expensive. So let me leave you with this, and this is the wake-up call for young founders. If you're a young founder today earning good money, you're not ahead, you're exposed. Your job isn't to look successful on the outside, it's to become unbreakable. And this means extracting profit early, building assets earlier than other people, diversifying income, identifying, respecting, understanding downside risk, and playing a longer game than everyone else. Because the founders that keep their wealth, they aren't louder, they aren't flashier or luckier, they are quieter. They are more disciplined, they are more patient, they are more structured, and they move with intent. And they understand one thing that most people never do. Income is temporary, but wealth is built deliberately.